My name is Chip, and I am 54 years old. I spent my entire adult life believing that if you love your family hard enough, they will love you back. I worked 2 jobs for nearly 2 decades, missed countless nights of sleep, and gave every dollar I ever earned to build a home for my wife and son. On my son Marcus's 28th birthday, I walked into our living room carrying a gift that meant everything to me. He looked at me and said the only present he wanted was for me to disappear from his life. So I picked up my coat, packed a small bag, and I left. I never looked back. Before I tell you the rest of this story, I want to know where you are watching from today. Drop your city or country in the comments below. If this story touches your heart, please hit that like button and subscribe to this channel. Now let me take you back to where it all began. I grew up in a small town in Ohio, the kind of place where everyone knew your name and your business. My father worked at the local steel mill for 37 years until his back gave out. My mother cleaned houses for wealthy families on the other side of town. We never had much, but we had enough. More importantly, I learned the value of honest work from watching my parents sacrifice everything for our family. I met Donna when I was 22 years old. We both worked at a little diner called Rosie's on the corner of Main Street and 4th Avenue. I was a line cook flipping burgers and frying eggs from 5 in the morning until 2 in the afternoon. Donna was a waitress, and I still remember the first time I saw her smile. She had this way of making everyone feel special, like they were the only person in the room. I fell in love with her before I even knew her name. We got married 2 years later in a small ceremony at the Methodist church, where her grandmother had been baptized. Donna wore her mother's wedding dress, and I borrowed a suit from my older brother. We did not have money for a honeymoon, so we spent our first night as husband and wife eating pizza in our tiny apartment and dreaming about the future. I promised her that night that I would give her and our future children everything I never had growing up. Marcus came into the world on a cold February morning when I was 26 years old. I remember standing in that hospital room holding this tiny human being in my arms and feeling tears stream down my face. He had Donna's eyes and my stubborn chin. In that moment, I made a silent vow to be the best father I could possibly be. I would work as hard as necessary to give my son opportunities that I never had. And work hard I did. For the next 15 years, I held down 2 jobs simultaneously. During the day, I worked as a plumber for Henderson & Sons, a local company that had been in business for 3 generations. The work was physical and demanding, crawling under houses, digging trenches, fixing pipes in basements that flooded during heavy rains. My hands became rough and calloused. My knees ached constantly, and my lower back never stopped hurting. But I never complained because I knew every dollar I earned was going toward my family's future. At night, I worked as a security guard at a warehouse on the outskirts of town. My shift ran from 6 in the evening until midnight 6 days a week. I would come home, eat a quick dinner that Donna left in the refrigerator, and collapse into bed around 1 in the morning. My alarm would go off at 5, and I would do it all over again. Most nights I slept maybe 4 or 5 hours. Some nights I slept even less. I never bought new clothes for myself. I wore the same work boots until the soles wore through, then I patched them with duct tape and kept going. When Marcus needed new sneakers for basketball tryouts, I wore my worn-out boots for another 6 months. When Donna wanted to redecorate the living room, I picked up extra shifts. When Marcus got accepted to a summer science camp that cost $800, I sold my fishing gear, the one hobby I had kept for myself. The biggest sacrifice came when Marcus was 17 years old. He had his heart set on a 1998 Ford Mustang that one of the neighbors was selling. It was candy apple red, and Marcus talked about that car every single day for 3 months. I could not afford to buy it outright, So I sold my pickup truck, the same truck my father had given me before he passed away. That truck meant everything to me, but seeing the look on my son's face when I handed him those keys made it worth every ounce of heartache. I also gave up my home office when Marcus turned 15. He said he needed more space, that sharing a wall with his parents was embarrassing when his friends came over. So I moved my small desk into the corner of the garage and converted my office into a bedroom for him. I spent 3 weekends painting the walls, installing new carpet, and building custom shelves for his books and trophies. Marcus barely said thank you, but I told myself that teenagers were just like that. Despite everything, those early years with Marcus were some of the happiest of my life. When he was young, he followed me everywhere like a shadow. Every Saturday morning, we would wake up before dawn and drive out to Miller's Lake for fishing. I taught him how to bait a hook, how to cast a line, how to be patient, and wait for the fish to bite. Those quiet mornings on the water, just the two of us, were sacred. We talked about everything and nothing, and I felt closer to him than to anyone else in the world. I taught Marcus how to ride a bike in the driveway of our first house, running alongside him, with my hand on the seat until he found his balance. I taught him how to swim at the community pool, holding him up in the shallow end until he trusted the water to carry him. I taught him how to fix a leaky faucet, how to change a flat tire, how to shake hands like a man. I poured everything I knew into that boy. One memory stands out above all the others. When Marcus was 12 years old, I took him camping at Pine Ridge State Park. We set up our tent by the lake, built a fire, and roasted marshmallows until they turned golden brown. That night, we lay on our backs outside the tent and watched the stars. Marcus pointed at the constellations and told me their names, things he had learned in science class. I told him stories about my father and grandfather, about the men who came before us and the values they passed down. As we watched a shooting star streak across the sky, Marcus turned to me and said, "Dad, I want to be just like you when I grow up." Those words meant more to me than any paycheck I ever earned. I believed that everything I sacrificed was worth it because of moments like that. I believed that the bond between us was unbreakable. I had no idea that something was already beginning to shift slowly and quietly in ways I could not yet see. When Marcus graduated high school, he was accepted to a prestigious private university in Boston. The tuition was astronomical, nearly $40,000 per year, not including room and board, textbooks, or living expenses. Donna and I sat at the kitchen table for hours, going over our finances, trying to figure out how we could possibly make it work. We took out a second mortgage on the house. We drained our savings account. I picked up even more overtime at both jobs, working 7 days a week for months at a time. Donna went back to work part-time at a retail store in the mall. We did everything we could to give Marcus this opportunity, and I told everyone who would listen how proud I was of my son. The first few months, everything seemed fine. Marcus called home every day, sometimes twice a day. He told us about his classes, his roommate, the dining hall food that he complained about, but secretly enjoyed. Donna and I would sit together on the couch, passing the phone back and forth, hanging on every word. It felt like our sacrifices were already paying off. But then something changed. The daily calls became weekly calls. The weekly calls became monthly calls. When Marcus did call, he seemed distracted, like he was doing us a favor by checking in. His responses became short and clipped. "Yeah. Fine. Busy." I got to go. I noticed it first during Thanksgiving of his freshman year. Marcus came home for the holiday, but he seemed like a different person. He spent most of his time in his room texting on his phone and laughing at things we could not see. At dinner, he barely touched the food. He complained that the turkey was dry, that the mashed potatoes were too lumpy, that our house smelled like old people. I tried to brush it off. I told myself that he was just adjusting to his new life, that college was a stressful time. But there was something in his eyes that I had never seen before, a kind of distance, like he was looking through me instead of at me. I remember one moment from that visit that I could not shake. Marcus was on the phone with one of his new friends when I walked into the living room. I heard him say, "Hold on, my dad's here." Then he lowered his voice, but I still caught the words. "Yeah, he is a plumber." I know, right? I could hear laughter on the other end of the line, and Marcus laughed along with them. My son was embarrassed of me. The realization hit me like a punch to the stomach. All those years of working 2 jobs, of sacrificing everything, of crawling through mud and sewage so that my son could have a better life. And he was embarrassed to tell his fancy college friends what I did for a living. Around the same time, I started to notice changes in Donna as well. She seemed to take Marcus's side in every disagreement, no matter how small. If I asked Marcus to help with the dishes, Donna would say, "Leave him alone, he is tired from studying." If I suggested that Marcus spend less time on his phone and more time with the family, Donna would roll her eyes and tell me I was being old-fashioned. Donna also started making comments about me that stung more than I wanted to admit. She pointed out that I dressed like a mechanic even when we went to church. She complained that I did not know how to make small talk at Marcus's university events. She told me once in a voice that was not quite joking that I was not as sophisticated as the fathers of Marcus's new friends. I tried to talk to my oldest friend Harold about what was happening. Harold and I had known each other since high school, and he was one of the few people I trusted completely. We met for coffee at the same diner where I used to work, and I told him everything. The distance from Marcus, the criticism from Donna, the feeling that I was becoming invisible in my own home. Harold listened quietly, then set down his coffee cup and looked me straight in the eyes. He said, "Chip, I am going to tell you something you do not want to hear. Your family is taking you for granted. They have forgotten who built the foundation they are standing on. And if you do not draw a line somewhere, they are going to walk all over you until there is nothing left." I shook my head and defended them. I said that Donna was just stressed that Marcus was going through a phase. I made excuses for the people who were slowly breaking my heart. Harold sighed and said, "I hope you are right, buddy. But I have seen this before, and it does not usually get better on its own." I told myself he was being pessimistic. I told myself that everything would go back to normal once Marcus graduated and grew up a little. I could not have been more wrong. Marcus graduated from college with honors and immediately landed a high-paying job at a financial firm in New York City. The starting salary was more than I had ever made in a single year of my life. I was proud of him, genuinely proud, even though our relationship had become strained. At the graduation ceremony, I wore the nicest suit I owned, the same one I had worn to my own father's funeral 10 years earlier. Donna had her hair done at a salon and bought a new dress. We drove 6 hours to Boston, checked into a modest hotel, and arrived at the ceremony early so we could get good seats. What I remember most about that day is not the pomp and circumstance, not the speeches or the diplomas. What I remember is standing in the crowd after the ceremony, watching Marcus pose for photos with his friends, and realizing that he never once looked in our direction. When I finally caught his eye and waved, he gave a quick nod and turned back to his group. He did not introduce us to anyone. He did not invite us to stand with him for a single photograph. On the drive home, Donna was quiet. I asked her if she had noticed how distant Marcus seemed. She just stared out the window and said, "He is busy, Chip. He has important people to impress. You should not take it personally." But I did take it personally. How could I not? In the months that followed, the distance between Marcus and me grew wider. He moved to New York and rarely called. When I suggested visiting him, he always had an excuse. The apartment was too small. He was traveling for work. The timing was not good. I stopped asking after the fourth or fifth rejection. The few times Marcus did come home, he made his disdain for our lives painfully clear. He complained that the house smelled like engine oil and grass clippings. He wrinkled his nose at the dinner I had spent hours preparing. He spent most of his time on his laptop taking calls from the office, barely acknowledging our presence. The Christmas when Marcus was 26 years old nearly broke me. I had spent 6 months saving up to buy him a beautiful watch, a stainless steel timepiece with a leather band that cost more than my monthly grocery budget. I wrapped it carefully, wrote a heartfelt note about how proud I was of him, and placed it under the tree with trembling hands. On Christmas morning, Marcus opened the gift. He looked at the watch for a long moment, then set it aside without trying it on. He said, "Dad, you clearly do not know anything about fashion. This is not the kind of watch anyone wears anymore." He left the watch on the coffee table when he returned to New York 2 days later. He never took it with him. He never mentioned it again. That night, after everyone had gone to bed, I sat alone in the dark living room with that watch in my hands. I stared at it for hours, thinking about all the overtime shifts I had worked to afford it, all the meals I had skipped, all the small pleasures I had denied myself. And for what? To be dismissed, like I was nothing. The rejections kept coming. I invited Marcus to go fishing with me just like we used to do when he was a boy. He laughed and said, "Dad, I am not a kid anymore. I do not have time for that stuff." I called him on his birthday, but the call went straight to voicemail. He never called me back. My health started to suffer. I could not sleep. I would lie awake for hours, replaying conversations in my head, wondering what I had done wrong. I lost 15 pounds without trying because I had no appetite. My doctor told me that my blood pressure was dangerously high and that I needed to reduce stress in my life. I did not know how to tell him that the stress was coming from inside my own home. Donna offered no comfort. If anything, she seemed to side with Marcus more than ever. She compared me unfavorably to the father of Marcus's girlfriend, a man named Bradley, who owned a chain of car dealerships and wore suits that cost more than my truck. She said things like, "Bradley knows how to carry himself in public. Bradley would never embarrass his son like that." I tried to convince myself that if I just loved them harder, tried harder, gave more of myself, eventually things would change. I believed that my patience and sacrifice would be rewarded. I did not realize that the worst moment of my life was still ahead of me. Marcus was about to turn 28 years old, and I decided that this birthday would be different. I was determined to show him how much I loved him, to bridge the gap that had grown between us, to remind him of the bond we once shared. I spent an entire month preparing. I repainted the living room in the colors that Marcus liked. I bought new decorations and a beautiful tablecloth. I ordered a birthday cake from the most expensive bakery in town, a 3-layer chocolate masterpiece that cost nearly $200. I even enrolled in an online cooking class so I could learn to make restaurant-quality steak, the kind that Marcus bragged about eating in New York. But the most important gift was something money could not buy. I decided to give Marcus my grandfather's pocket watch, a family heirloom that had been passed down through 4 generations. That watch had belonged to my great-grandfather, then my grandfather, then my father, and finally, to me. It was the most valuable thing I owned, not because of its monetary worth, but because of what it represented. It was a symbol of our family's history, of the men who came before us, and the values we passed on. I took the watch to a jeweler and had it cleaned and polished. I replaced the worn leather strap with a new one. I spent 3 nights writing a letter to Marcus telling him about the history of the watch, about my father and grandfather, about how much I loved him and how proud I was of the man he was becoming. I sealed the letter in an envelope and placed it inside the watch box. The day of the party arrived. I was nervous and excited like a child on Christmas morning. I had set the table with our best dishes. The house smelled like grilled steak and fresh flowers. Everything was perfect. Marcus arrived in the late afternoon with his girlfriend, Stephanie. I had only met her once before at a brief dinner in New York that had felt more like a job interview than a family gathering. Stephanie came from old money, the kind of wealth that made my life savings look like pocket change. She drove a car that cost more than my house. From the moment they walked in, I could feel the tension. Stephanie looked around the living room with an expression that I can only describe as pity mixed with contempt. She ran her finger along the mantel and examined it for dust. She whispered something to Marcus, and they both smirked. Donna greeted them with hugs and champagne. She barely acknowledged me, focusing all her attention on Marcus and his glamorous girlfriend. I tried to shake it off. I told myself that tonight was about celebrating my son, not about my wounded pride. Dinner was a disaster. I served the steaks that I had practiced making for weeks. I thought they were perfect, cooked medium rare, just the way Marcus used to like them. But when Marcus cut into his, he made a face like he had bitten into something rotten. He chewed slowly, then set down his fork. Stephanie whispered something in his ear, and they both laughed. It was a quiet laugh, the kind that was meant to exclude rather than include. Donna pretended not to notice. She kept the conversation going, asking about their work and their travel plans, acting like everything was normal. After dinner, I brought out the cake, and we sang Happy Birthday. Marcus blew out the candles with a bored expression on his face. Then it was time for gifts. My heart was pounding as I handed Marcus the small wooden box that contained my grandfather's watch. He took it without looking at me and opened the lid. He glanced at the watch, then pulled out my letter and scanned it quickly. For a moment, I allowed myself to hope. I imagined him reading my words, understanding the love behind them, maybe even getting a little emotional. I imagined him looking up at me with the same warmth he had shown me when he was 12 years old, lying under the stars, and telling me he wanted to be just like me. Instead, Marcus set the box down on the coffee table. He leaned back in his chair, crossed his arms, and looked directly into my eyes. He said, "Dad, you want to know what I really want for my birthday?" I nodded, still holding on to hope. "Yes, son. Tell me." He said, "I want you to disappear from my life. That is the only gift I need." The words hung in the air like poison. I could not breathe. I could not move. I looked at Donna, hoping she would say something, hoping she would defend me. She stared at her lap and said nothing. Stephanie covered her mouth, but I could see her shoulders shaking with laughter. She was enjoying this. My humiliation was entertainment to her. I sat there for what felt like an eternity, waiting for someone to tell me it was a joke. No one did. Finally, something shifted inside me. The part of my heart that had been clinging to hope simply let go. I felt a strange calmness wash over me, the kind of peace that comes when you finally accept a truth you have been fighting for years. I stood up slowly. My knees ached and my back hurt, but I forced myself to stand straight. I looked at my son, at my wife, at the elegant stranger who was laughing at my pain, and I made a decision. I said, "All right, if that is what you want." I walked upstairs to the bedroom that had been mine for 28 years. I pulled a small suitcase from the closet and began to pack. I took only the essentials, a few changes of clothes, my father's Bible, a photograph of Marcus as a baby before the world had changed him, and I took my grandfather's watch. If Marcus did not want it, then it would stay with me. I carried my suitcase downstairs and walked through the living room. No one moved. No one spoke. Marcus stared at his phone. Donna examined her fingernails. Stephanie sipped her champagne. I stopped at the front door and turned around one last time. I looked at Marcus, the boy I had loved more than my own life, the child I had sacrificed everything for. I said, I have loved you with everything I have. Someday, I hope you understand what you threw away today. Then I walked out of my own house, got into my car, and drove away. I did not know where I was going. I did not have a plan. But I knew one thing with absolute certainty. I was never going to let anyone treat me like that again. The first week after I left was the darkest of my life. I checked into a cheap motel about 30 miles outside of town, a place with thin walls and stained carpets and a neon sign that buzzed all night. I lay on the bed for 3 days straight, staring at the ceiling, unable to eat or sleep or think. I kept replaying Marcus's words in my head. I want you to disappear from my life. How had we gotten here? Where had I gone wrong? I searched my memory for the moment when my son had stopped loving me, but I could not find it. The change had been so gradual, so subtle, that I had not recognized it until it was too late. On the 4th day, my phone rang. My phone. It was Harold. He had heard through mutual friends that something had happened, that I had left Donna and was not coming back. His voice was gruff but concerned. He said, "Where are you, Chip? I am coming to get you." I told him I did not want company. He said he did not care what I wanted. An hour later, he was knocking on my motel room door. Harold took one look at me and shook his head. He said, "You look like death warmed over. Pack your stuff. You are coming to Vermont with me." Harold had retired a few years earlier and moved to a small cabin in the mountains of Vermont. He had been after me to visit for years, but I had always been too busy working, too busy sacrificing, too busy trying to hold my family together. Now I had no family left to hold. The drive to Vermont took 7 hours. Harold did most of the talking, filling the silence with stories about his cabin, the local wildlife, the peace he had found in his retirement. I listened without really hearing, my mind still trapped in that living room, still watching my son dismiss me like a servant who had outlived his usefulness. The cabin was small but beautiful, nestled in a valley surrounded by pine trees and mountains. There was a creek that ran behind the property, and a porch that looked out over an endless expanse of green. For the first time in days, I took a full breath. Harold showed me to the guest room and told me I could stay as long as I needed. He said, "There is no rush, Chip. You take all the time you need to figure things out. That is what friends are for." The first few weeks were hard. I barely spoke. I spent most of my time walking through the woods alone, trying to make sense of what had happened. The pain was constant, a physical ache in my chest that never went away. I missed my son. I missed the man I thought my son was. I mourned the relationship we would never have. But slowly something began to change. Harold put me to work, helping him renovate the cabin. We replaced the old roof, built a new deck, fixed the plumbing in the bathroom. The work was familiar and comforting. With each swing of the hammer, each turn of the wrench, I felt a little more like myself. I also met Harold's neighbor, an older woman named Eleanor, who lived alone about a quarter-mile down the road. Eleanor was in her early 60s, a widow whose husband had passed away 5 years earlier. She had kind eyes and a gentle voice, and she made the best apple pie I had ever tasted. Eleanor invited me over for tea one afternoon, and somehow I found myself telling her everything. The whole story poured out of me like water from a broken dam. My years of sacrifice, my son's rejection, my wife's betrayal. I talked for hours, and Eleanor listened without interrupting. When I finally finished, she reached across the table and put her hand on mine. She said, "The people we love the most are often the ones who can hurt us the deepest. But their cruelty says nothing about your worth. You gave everything you had, and that makes you a good man. What they did with your gifts is their burden to carry, not yours." Those words planted a seed inside me, a tiny spark of hope that maybe, just maybe, I could find a way forward. I started fishing again. There was a lake about 2 miles from the cabin, and I would wake before dawn and hike out there with my rod and tackle box. The quiet mornings on the water reminded me of the times I had spent with Marcus when he was young, but now those memories brought peace instead of pain. I had given my son those moments, those lessons that love. Whatever he did with them was no longer my responsibility. I also started keeping a journal. Every night before bed, I would write down my thoughts and feelings, trying to make sense of the chaos inside my head. Writing helped me see patterns I had missed before. The way I had allowed myself to be taken for granted. The way I had confused love with martyrdom. The way I had given so much of myself that there was nothing left. After about 3 months, I started looking for work. There was a hardware store in the nearest town about 15 minutes from the cabin. The owner was a man named Walter, a tough old guy in his 70s, who had been running the place since before I was born. I walked in one day to buy some supplies and ended up talking to him for 2 hours. Walter offered me a job managing the repair department. The pay was not great, but it was honest work, the kind I understood. I accepted without hesitation. The customers at the hardware store were different from anyone I had dealt with before. They were farmers and carpenters and retirees, people who valued hard work and straight talk. They appreciated my knowledge and my willingness to help. For the first time in years, I felt respected. 6 months after I left Ohio, I looked in the mirror and barely recognized myself. I had gained back the weight I had lost. The dark circles under my eyes had faded. I was sleeping through the night, eating 3 meals a day, laughing at Harold's terrible jokes. I was not healed, not completely, but I was healing. And I was starting to understand something important. My happiness could not depend on the approval of people who had proven they did not value me. I had to learn to value myself. About a year after I moved to Vermont, I received a phone call that changed everything. It was from a lawyer in Connecticut informing me that my Uncle Edgar had passed away. I had not seen Uncle Edgar in over 20 years. He was my mother's younger brother, a quiet man who had never married and had spent most of his life building a small business. We had exchanged Christmas cards occasionally, but that was the extent of our relationship. I felt sad to hear of his passing, but I was not prepared for what came next. The lawyer explained that Uncle Edgar had left me his entire estate, the farm where he had lived for 40 years, his savings account, and his business, a home repair company that he had built from scratch. I was stunned. I asked the lawyer why Edgar had chosen me, and he said that my uncle had always admired me for my work ethic. He had followed my career from a distance and believed that I was the only person in the family who truly understood the value of hard work. I drove to Connecticut to see the property. The farm was beautiful, about 50 acres of rolling hills and pastures, with a farmhouse that needed some work but had good bones. The business was small but solid, with a loyal customer base and a reputation for quality service. It was in many ways a blank canvas waiting for someone to bring it back to life. I made a decision. I was going to honor my uncle's legacy by building something meaningful. Over the next 2 years, I poured everything I had into that business. I used my decades of experience to improve operations, train new employees, and expand our services. I worked long hours, but now the work felt different. I was building something for myself, not sacrificing myself for people who did not appreciate it. The business grew faster than I had imagined possible. Within 2 years, we had become one of the most successful home repair companies in the region. I was featured in the local newspaper as an example of entrepreneurial success. I bought a beautiful house on a lake, the kind of place I had dreamed about as a young man, but never thought I could afford. One evening, about 2 years after I had left Ohio, my phone rang. It was Donna. Her voice sounded different, smaller, somehow less confident. She said she had been thinking about me, that she missed me, that she wanted to talk. She asked if we could meet somewhere, just the two of us, to discuss things. I listened quietly until she finished. Then I said, "Donna, you had almost 30 years to appreciate what we had. You chose to stand with Marcus when he told me to disappear. You chose to stay silent when I needed you most. I am not angry anymore, but I am also not interested in going backward. I have built a new life, and there is no place in it for someone who could not see my worth until I was gone." She started to cry. She said she was sorry, that she had made a terrible mistake. I told her that I accepted her apology, but that some doors once closed cannot be reopened. A few months later, I heard through Harold that Marcus had lost his job. There had been some kind of scandal at his company, something involving questionable financial practices. He was not arrested, but his reputation was ruined. Stephanie had left him the moment the money dried up. I will admit that I felt a small flicker of satisfaction when I heard this news. It was not pride or vindication, just a quiet acknowledgement that actions have consequences. Marcus had spent years climbing a ladder that was leaning against the wrong wall. Now he was learning what it felt like to fall. One rainy afternoon, I was working in my office when my assistant told me there was someone in the lobby asking to see me. I walked out and found Marcus standing there, looking nothing like the arrogant young man who had dismissed me at his birthday party. He was thinner. His expensive clothes were wrinkled. His eyes had dark circles beneath them. He looked like someone who had not slept well in months. He said, "Dad, I need to talk to you." I led him into my office and closed the door. I sat behind my desk and waited for him to speak. The words came out in a rush. He told me he was sorry. He said he had been wrong, that he had let success go to his head, that he had forgotten where he came from. He said he needed help, that he was broke and alone, and did not know where else to turn. I let him finish. Then I said, "Marcus, do you remember what you told me on your 28th birthday? You said you wanted me to disappear from your life. You said that was the only gift you wanted, and I gave you that gift. I walked away, and I built a new life for myself." He started to cry. He said, "I know, Dad. I was horrible. I do not know why I said those things. Please, I need your help." I looked at my son, this man who had once been my entire world, and I felt something unexpected. Not anger, not bitterness. Just a profound sadness for what might have been. I said, "I am not going to give you money, Marcus, and I am not going to give you a job. If I did that, I would not be helping you. I would just be enabling the same patterns that got you here in the first place." He looked shocked. He said, "Then what am I supposed to do?" I stood up and walked to the window. Outside, the rain was falling steadily, turning the parking lot into a sea of puddles. I said, "When you told me to disappear, I had nothing. No money, no job, no plan. I started over from zero at 54 years old. It was the hardest thing I have ever done, but it was also the best thing that ever happened to me. I learned that I was stronger than I knew. I learned that my worth was not dependent on anyone else's opinion. And I learned that sometimes you have to lose everything before you can find yourself." I turned back to face him. I said, "You are smart, Marcus. You are capable. You can rebuild your life just like I rebuilt mine, but you have to do it yourself. That is the only way it will mean anything. He stared at me for a long moment. Then slowly he stood up and walked toward me. He put his arms around me and hugged me for the first time in years. I could feel his shoulders shaking as he cried. He said, "I am so sorry, Dad, for everything." I hugged him back. I said, "I know, son. I forgive you." But forgiveness does not mean going back to the way things were. It means letting go of the pain so we can both move forward. He pulled back and looked at me. His eyes were red and his face was wet with tears. He said, "I understand, and I promise I am going to be better. I am going to make you proud." I put my hand on his shoulder. I said, "Make yourself proud first. That is what matters." He nodded. Then he turned and walked out of my office, out of my building, and into the rain. I watched him go, and I felt something I had not expected to feel. I felt free. Not because my son had finally apologized, but because I had finally found the strength to love him without losing myself in the process. That was 3 years ago. Today, as I sit on the porch of my house overlooking the lake, I think about everything that has happened and everything I have learned. I wake up every morning at 5:30. I make myself a cup of coffee and carry it out to the dock. I watch the sun rise over the water, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. I breathe in the fresh air, and I feel grateful for every single day I have been given. My business is still thriving. I have stepped back from the day-to-day operations and handed control to a team of talented young people who share my values. They call me sometimes for advice, and I give it freely, but I no longer feel the need to prove myself through work. I have nothing left to prove. Eleanor and I still have tea together every week. She is in her late 60s now, a little slower than she used to be, but her mind is as sharp as ever. She tells me stories about her late husband, and I tell her stories about my journey. We laugh. We cry. We sit in comfortable silence and watch the birds. Harold and I still go fishing every chance we get. We do not catch much, but that is not really the point. The point is the friendship, the camaraderie, the simple pleasure of two old men sitting by a lake and appreciating the time they have left. I heard recently that Marcus got a new job, something modest but stable. He is working his way back up, starting from the bottom, like I told him to do. He sends me a card every Christmas now, and sometimes he calls on my birthday. We are not close, not like we were when he was young, but there is something between us that feels honest, something built on truth instead of illusion. I do not hate Marcus. I do not hate Donna. What would be the point? Carrying hatred is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. I chose to let go of my anger, not because they deserved forgiveness, but because I deserved peace. The biggest lesson I learned through all of this is simple but profound. You cannot make someone love you by sacrificing yourself. Love is not a transaction. It is not something you earn through suffering. Real love flows freely between people who respect and appreciate each other. And if that respect is not there, no amount of sacrifice will create it. I also learned that walking away is not the same as giving up. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is recognize when a situation is destroying you and have the courage to leave. Staying in a place where you are not valued is not loyalty. It is self-destruction. Most importantly, I learned that it is never too late to start over. I was 54 years old when I walked out of that house with nothing but a suitcase and a broken heart. I had no money, no plan, no idea what the future held. But I took one step and then another and then another. And eventually, those steps led me to a life I never could have imagined. If you are watching this, and you recognize yourself in my story, if you are in a relationship or a family or a job where you give everything and receive nothing but contempt in return, I want you to know something. You deserve better. You deserve to be loved and respected and appreciated for who you are, not just for what you can provide. You deserve to wake up every morning and feel excited about your life, not drained and defeated. And if the people around you cannot see your worth, then maybe it is time to find people who can. I am not saying it will be easy. Walking away from everything you know is terrifying. Starting over from nothing is painful. There will be nights when you lie awake wondering if you made the right choice. But I promise you this. On the other side of that fear, there is freedom. On the other side of that pain, there is peace. And on the other side of that doubt, there is a version of yourself that you have not met yet, a version that is stronger and wiser and happier than you ever imagined possible. I found that version of myself on a rainy night when I walked out my front door and never looked back. Maybe it is time for you to find yours. I want to hear your thoughts. Have you ever been in a situation where you had to choose between your own well-being and a relationship that was hurting you? What did you do? Share your story in the comments below. Your experience might help someone else who is going through the same thing. If this story touched your heart, please hit that like button. It helps more people find this channel. And if you have not already, please subscribe and turn on notifications so you do not miss any of our future stories. Thank you for spending this time with me today. I am grateful for each and every one of you who watches, who listens, who shares your own experiences in the comments. You are part of a community of people who understand that life is not always easy, but that there is always hope. May you find the courage to walk toward the life you deserve, even if the path is uncertain. May you find peace in knowing that your worth is not defined by others. And may you never forget that sometimes the greatest gift you can give yourself is permission to let go. Take care of yourselves.